right, we've got a few people in our audience. More and more will jump on in the next couple of minutes, so we will get started. So we've got plenty of time to go through this session. So hello and welcome. My name is Rhiannon Boyd and I'm the CEO for ACTS. For anyone that isn't familiar with ACTS, we're a unique not-profit member organisation that aims to engage, empower and exemplify organisations to tackle complex environmental and social issues and lead on the transformation to a sustainable future. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all here today to this special panel event. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all respectively meet from, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend those respects to any First Nations and Indigenous people who may be joining with us on the call today. I live and work on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the Kulin Nation representing an alliance of 5 language groups who are the traditional owners of the lands of Melbourne and much of central Victoria. I'd also like to take this opportunity and utilise the platform we have at the moment to acknowledge the really difficult time that many First Nations people may be dealing with at the moment, particularly in Australia, as we approach the upcoming referendum. So this referendum is the one that seeks to change our constitution to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples of this country. At ACTS, we strongly stand in support of a yes vote to constitutionally enshrine a voice to Parliament. So we do acknowledge that there are differing opinions within our community, and of course we encourage respectful discussion and informed debate in the lead up to the referendum in October. But we do really want to acknowledge the fact that even that this has been debated, not to mention all the confusion and much of the misinformation that's circulating at the moment, it does place an enormous cultural load that Indigenous Australians have to carry during this parliamentary process. So if you're unsure what I'm talking about, or if you're interested in learning more about what the voice is and what a yes vote will mean, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the ACTS team. We can point you in the direction for fact-checked information and resources. I do hope that you'll join us in anticipating a positive outcome for the referendum, as we believe it represents a crucial step forward in allyship and realising the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So with that being said, I'd like to officially welcome you all to this special panel event, Green Careers, Insights from Young Sustainability Professionals. As the title gives away, we're joined today by some amazing early career professionals, meaning that they've not long left university to start their professional careers, and they're here to share their experiences with you. So each of our 5 guest panelists represents one of the many careers that are available if you're interested in having a green focus to your work. What I find really exciting myself is that there is a huge diversity of roles that are available to people these days after you graduate. I'm going to age myself a bit here, but when I graduated from uni with an ecology and conservation degree almost 20 years ago, I really struggled to find a job that suited my skill set as a fresh graduate with an interest in sustainability. So we know now that there's a large number and diversity in modern careers that are available that do incorporate sustainability, and it's constantly growing. But it's still a really competitive field for those looking to get started. We know through surveying done by SOS International, or Students Organising for Sustainability International, it shows that more and more students not only have high expectations from the educational institutions they attend when it comes to sustainability credentials, but they're also thinking about their careers in terms of sustainability. So they did a survey which included nearly 70,000 students in higher education institutions across the globe. And they had a huge 90% of respondents expressed their willingness to accept a starting salary 5% below the average to join a sustainable company. And even more surprisingly, 67% of them were prepared to go further and accept a starting salary 15% below average if it meant working for an organisation committed to sustainability. Their survey data also highlighted that contribution to social value ranked higher in priority than benefits offered by the company, so whether those benefits were financial or otherwise. So this data underscores a growing significance of sustainable practices and values in the eyes of the future workforce. I will add a disclaimer, that study was from 2020, so I would be interested to see updated data on this that would take into account current cost of living crisis in a post-pandemic world. But We do agree at ACTS that this trend of prioritising sustainability isn't just theoretical, and this was emphasised earlier in the year. We had an ACTS member roundtable, which was hosted in collaboration with the Sustainable Universities Network, or SUN, which is a student group, and they confirmed this shift in focus amongst students as well. So with all that in mind, we put this panel session together to provide an insight into what some of the modern sustainability focused roles look like, and hopefully our panelists will give you some ideas on what you can do and how you can secure the sustainability job of your dreams. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have joining us Raveena Grace, who's the Sustainability Engagement Officer at the University of Melbourne, Julia English, who's a PhD candidate at RMIT University, Chris Dixon, who's a senior consultant at Point Advisory, Sophie Brooker, who's a co-founder and COO, or Chief Operating Officer at Nonstop Solutions, and Jess Ljubojevic. I knew I'd stuff that up and I stumbled over it. Sorry, she can correct me and say her name properly. Environmental Management Officer at ANU. So to kickstart the session, each of our panelists is going to provide a 5-minute introduction, and they're going to tell you about what they studied at uni through to what they do now. Then after each introduction, we're going to move into, after they've all had their chance to introduce themselves, we'll move into a Q&A session. So this is your opportunity to pick their brains and find out anything else you'd like to know to help with your own sustainable career journey. I welcome anyone in the audience to submit questions you have through the Zoom Q&A function, and I'll facilitate those questions a little bit later in the session. So that's it. To get us started, I'm going to pass first to Rav. Raveena has been working at the University of Melbourne for 5 years in the sustainability team as part of campus management. She currently holds the position of Sustainability Engagement Officer and is going to tell us a little bit more around what that means. Over to you, Rav.
Thanks so much, Ree, and thank you to everyone that's here today. Really excited to chat to you about what I do. So basically, as Ree said, my name is Rav. I'm the Sustainability Engagement Officer at the University of Melbourne. But I'll tell you a little bit about what that involves, but how I started was I've always been really interested in sustainability, and I've always been really fascinated by the science behind things like bushfires or floods, or the science behind climate change. So when I was little, I started reading books about that, and my grandparents would be very supportive of it, and they'd always teach me more about it. But when I got to uni, so I straight out of school, I studied science at Melbourne Uni, and my initial thought was that I was going to study genetics and get into that kind of side of things. But I just wasn't really my passion. So about halfway through that degree, I actually switched to ecology or environmental science, but ecology was the main major at Melbourne at that time under science. So within that, I basically studied animal structure and function, conservation. That was my main focus area. Absolutely loved it. Definitely preferred that to genetics, but I still realized that that wasn't the area that I wanted specifically to go into, but it was definitely on the right path. So after I did my Bachelor of Science, I did a Master of Environment at the University of Melbourne. And in that Master of Environment, I ended up majoring in climate change. So that was the name of the major. But within that, I specifically focused around education, behavior change, those kind of areas. And that was where I found my niche. So I've always wanted to combine, I guess I do this a little less in my job now, but I've always wanted to combine the science of climate change and what I did study throughout the last couple of years, my bachelor's, to the behavior change education kind of side of things. And that's that's been one of my biggest passions, to try and educate other people about what they can do to get involved. So in masters, I did 3 years. I did it part-time. And I ended up volunteering for a program called Green Impact. So I was part of the first pilot of Green Impact. So my manager now, Sue Hopkins, she brought it over from the UK and implemented it at the University of Melbourne. And so I volunteered as a project assistant, and basically I was a student that helped staff implement green-based actions within their workspace. And because I volunteered for that program, the team was then looking for someone to come on board and help run the admin side of the program with the team. So I applied for that job, and I was very lucky to get that. So I was doing masters part-time, and then I was also working in the sustainability team at the University of Melbourne as a green impact officer. So I was helping to implement green impact. I was really lucky because I had Ree as one of my managers at the time as well. And together we made Green Impact great at the university. And so through that, my roles kind of just evolved from going from supporting Green Impact to then managing the whole program. So when Ree left Melbourne, I took on the Green Impact, and I was lucky enough to manage it all. So started as a volunteer and then manage it for the university. But now my role's evolving into basically sustainability, engagement, and education more broadly. So whilst Green Impact will always be so special to me, and it was my first kind of introduction to behaviour change and how to implement behaviour change, how to teach people about behaviour change with sustainability. Now my role encompasses that. So I do still look after Green Impact, but also running a lot of events or teaching people how to run sustainable events, running things like a sustainability week, which is next week, or also doing things like waste education. So another big passion of mine over the years that I found out has been waste. So now we're about to embark on a waste education roadshow and teaching people about contamination, for example, and what goes in the right bin. But then more than that, it's also around the strategy of sustainability engagement at the university. So we're working on things like implementing an actual action plan and a forward-facing document for the university to look at how we raise awareness with engagement and communications through sustainability for all of our campuses across the university. So my role encompasses a lot of different things, and I'm very lucky for it to be flexible and for it to be something that I can make it something that I truly want it to be and work on things that I love. But don't get me wrong, there's also things that I have done that I've trialed that I haven't really love, but it's still a great part of if you want to go into sustainability careers. For example, was tasked with setting up the environmental management system for campus management. And whilst it's so rewarding and it's such a great opportunity to learn, that just wasn't my niche set of skills. So I think through my journey of going from one extreme of the medical field to the other in sustainability, I've realized what I do really love, and I realized my biggest passion and how I can narrow that down and really focus in on my skills. So that's basically been my journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And don't worry, I'm going to pick up on a few of the things you've raised there, and we'll delve into it a little bit more in Q&A. But thank you for that overview, Rav. And interesting that you talk about waste as a big focus of your work. It's a nice segue to a really important area of circular economy that I think is going to get more and more spotlight shown on it in the years to come, and that is sustainable fashion. So that is a perfect way to introduce our next guest presenter, Julia English. So Julia is a PhD candidate at RMIT University, and her focus is in this area of sustainable fashion. So over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Yeah, it is a nice little segue. I'll just share my screen. Cool. So yeah, so hi. Okay. So hi, my name is Julia English. I'm currently doing my PhD at RMIT, which is, I guess I'm going to talk through a little bit about the journey to how I got to doing a PhD, because it wasn't, I guess, where I initially thought I would be going out of university. So I studied the Bachelor of Fashion Design Honours at RMIT University, which is a fashion-based degree, and I finished that in 2018, and I was sort of part of the era, I guess, where sustainability was becoming a key part of coursework, but not necessarily a core component. So I did do different courses which were looking at sustainability and impact throughout that degree, and that became a key part of one of my honours projects, was looking at how we can help people build attachment to their clothes and gain patina through use. After that, I think I spent the next year kind of figuring out what's next. And I think that's probably pretty common for a lot of people who work in fashion, is you sort of have this time after university where you're like, okay, I'll go intern with a few brands and I'll work in retail and I'll sort of, try to figure out where I want to sit. So as part of that, one of the roles which I did was I worked with a local circular design brand called ABCH and another local business called Lewis Hazel, which was really insightful for me because I saw like how much work goes into running these sorts of small sustainable businesses. And I guess it was helpful for me to kind of be like, I don't know that I can commit to that. Like that's a huge investment to work in like in sustainability, but as a small business, because so much of what you do is running the business. It's not necessarily making big change. And as well as that, I think I'd also been involved in an international design competition called Redress, and I'd attended a sort of fashion summit looking at sustainability within fashion in Copenhagen. And that was really helpful because they kind of highlighted to me like that as, particularly interning and participating in this design competition, that it was quite a financial drain, and that you do a lot of stuff when you first graduate for free. And it got to the point where I was like, oh gosh, sustainability, it's really costing me financially. And it wasn't necessarily, I felt like I was getting really burnt out. And it sort of lifestyle wise, it sort of became this opportunity towards the end of 2019 where I was able to look for work overseas, which was really exciting. And I used some of the connections that I built through previous events like the Copenhagen Youth Fashion Summit to get a job in corporate sustainability at Bestseller, which you might not know of the brand, but it's kind of like an international, multinational fast fashion company. They have brands like Jack & Jones or Vera Moda, which is probably the ones people might be most familiar with here. And this was actually really insightful. I think it was a very different side of sustainability. You do get paid relatively well to work in corporate sustainability, but I think for me it was quite a change of scope. When you work in a small brand, you see people who are driven like purely by their values, and they're making all their decisions based on sustainability often, and they want to really check all of those boxes around ethics and materials and design, and really trying to address as many things as possible. Stepping into sort of the more corporate side, you began to realize, well, I found that it was really interesting to see how things worked once it's much more of a top-down approach, and it was more like developing policies for the company and looking at how we can have principles around what types of materials we use. But it was also interesting because you also realized what you couldn't address, and things like, for example, the ethics of brand and overconsumption and changing the business models. These were kind of things that were outside the scope. And I probably would have stayed on at that company for a lot longer because I felt like it was really interesting to sort of see a different side of things. But as the pandemic hit and life changes, so I actually got laid off at the start of, in March in 2020, which sort of led to us coming back because I would move to Denmark for the role, me and my partner. So yeah, we came back to Melbourne and we were like, what do I do? And I was like, I can't go back to retail, was sort of my mindset at the time. And I'd heard that you could do a paid PhD. So I applied for a PhD in about April. Like it was very quick turnaround. I was sort of like, what do I do? Okay, let's try and apply for a PhD. So I did that. I applied for it and I did actually get a paid PhD, or it's on a stipend is sort of how it's positioned at RMIT. And that was originally looking at circular design. And through that, my research has sort of shifted a little bit more. And now I'm actually looking at how we can encourage reuse practices like upcycling, remanufacturing. And I've also begun to be involved in repair with a few other projects. So it's sort of been quite an evolution, and definitely doing a PhD and moving into academia wasn't actually what I initially thought to do with my research. Well, not with my research now, but what I initially thought to do when I started out. And I probably wouldn't have necessarily seen it as a way of making impact when I finished university. But I think what's been really interesting is that as I've been involved in the uni, you begin to see how the university can create change in perhaps different ways through things like consulting on policy, working on research grants. And one of the things which I have found really freeing is you can have quite radical ideas in a university, and you can, as a researcher, you can really question things like, is it ethical? Are we over-consuming? Do we just have too much stuff? And these types of questions you can't necessarily address within the corporate sort of space. So as a result, sorry, I'll just change to the next slide. I think for me, I'm now sort of finishing up my PhD. I'll just stop sharing, actually. Sorry. Cool. And yeah, I'm finishing up my PhD, and I do have sort of 3 key things which I sort of try to keep in mind as I go forward, which are impact, income, and enjoyment. And I mean, these for me, I think it's kind of has parallels to those three parallels of sustainability of, you know, social, environmental, and sort of financial. And that's because I've kind of realized that for me, I do kind of need a balance of all three, and that trying to find different projects and actions which sit within each of them is kind of how I can stay the course, because I think in sustainability I've seen a lot of people who haven't been able to commit to like a long-term career because they've got really burnt out. So yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing. Again, a few things I'd love to pick up on when we get into the discussion part. But yeah, I think rarely these things are linear. So it's always interesting to see the paths that get us to where we are now. So with that, we're going to move to our next panelist, and that's Chris Dixon, who's a senior consultant at Point Advisory. So what does that mean, Chris?
Hi, everyone. So thanks, Rihanna, for the lovely introduction. So I might jump into what that means in just a second. I might give a little bit of background to how I got there first. So I actually studied with Rav, doing the Master's of Environment at Uni Mel back in the day, and actually knew Rhiannon too through the Green Impact Program and several others. So it's funny coming back here. I majored in the tailored stream, which was a really good expression for how I'll determine my career aspirations in a second. I did have a slight leniency towards the climate change stream. I was very interested in that. And I graduated in 2020 during the height of the COVID pandemic, which gave me a lot of focus time on my research and ability to kind of really ponder what my next steps were. In terms of career aspirations during my studies, I think I was at a point where I was pivoting from where I'd been. I'd been in the water sector for a few years, working for an organization called the Alliance for Water Stewardship. And that was basically an approach developed to help groups of stakeholders really manage like a catchment level water asset across multiple properties to make sure that there's long-term water for everyone within that catchment. Whilst I loved it, I'd been working that in small community organizations for a long time in the not-for-profit sector and really wanted to try something new. So I came back to study at Melbourne to find different career paths. And the reason I picked the tailored was there were just so many different subjects I was interested in. I was interested in climate change, circular economy. I was interested in potentially looking at different areas within the water industry I was already looking at. So I really used the Masters as an opportunity just to explore what was available, what the different career paths were, and to chat to people who had been working in different careers at that time in different areas of environment and sustainability to see what was really out there. But as you said, now I'm a senior consultant at Point Advisory, which is now an ERM company. We got acquired recently, so we're part of a much bigger global team, which is very exciting, a lot of different expertise there. And I'm in the corporate sustainability and climate change team, which is a nice way of saying at a high level, I focus a lot on climate change mitigation work and climate risk work. So that can look like anything from developing greenhouse gas inventory, helping organizations, governments, various stakeholders look at where their emissions are coming from, developing net zero and emission reduction strategies, so helping them reduce their emissions over time, be carbon neutral, so offset, to anything like looking at really detailed analysis of what assets they have globally and what climate risks they're likely to be exposed from, so inundation, flooding, high temperatures, wind. And I wouldn't say we're too siloed at our work, which is good. In my job, we get to work with a diversity of other teams, which is really nice. I actually oddly find myself working with the human rights team a bit more from the perspective that, and I'll get to in a second, a lot of our work involves modeling and developing Excel tools and different types of tools. So we can lend those skills to other team members to help them develop frameworks and tools to measure other types of qualitative and quantitative metrics, which is very exciting to be able to delve into their world and absorb through osmosis what they're doing. On a daily level, what this looks like is, as I alluded to, a lot of Excel. So if you're not like an Excel hungry person and you hate numbers, I wouldn't suggest going too far into that. But at the same time, that's just one part of the climate change world. It also looks like running workshops. We develop guidance documents for not-for-profit organizations. We helped the Yarra Energy Foundation about a year ago develop a solar for apartments guide, which is publicly available, and that was great. We got to interview multiple people within the community to see, you know, what they thought of it, from the apartment holders themselves to industry experts to the governments, to see what programs were out there that could support people doing that. So it's very, very diverse, and you get a lot of opportunity to learn in this field, which is fantastic. I'll finish on, like, I did notice during my studies, if I was doing anything else that really added to this, I was working part-time, probably like Rav and many others here, we all had a job on the side, which in some way was sustainability related. Mine was still in water, as I was still finding my footing in the new sustainability world for climate change and what I was interested in. And I think that added layers of value, and also volunteering throughout for things like green impact as well, and different types of student societies just gave me that ability to delve into other things, but also just learn useful skills like stakeholder engagement, project management, budgeting, which is invaluable. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. Next, we're going to hear from Sophie and move into a bit of the entrepreneur space. Sophie's co-founder and crew for Nonstop Solutions. So, Sophie, give us some insights into your journey.
Kia ora, ko Sophie tuku ingoa. I am Wellington based in New Zealand, and I grew up with very sustainable parents, very sustainable family, and I think when I first got to university, I kind of rebelled against a lot of that. I went, I'm not doing this. I'm not being forced into caring about this, but very quickly realized after kind of not even a year of being at uni that it was something that was really important to me. So I went into university to study architecture, not with a sustainable focus by any means, but I did find that throughout the years, all of my projects started to incorporate sustainable architecture in some way, and very quickly realized that this passion wasn't something I was going to get rid of. It wasn't something that was just forced on me by my parents. It was something that I really needed to follow. And during university, I ended up volunteering for a university club called Plastic Diet, and we organised beach cleanups and events, bottle drives and things like this. And through that, met quite a few people who were studying sustainable degrees, and ended up volunteering for a group called Waitree Rally, or Wellington Waste Managers. So there was kind of a few, but Wellington Waste Managers. And what that group did was go to events and work through waste reduction with them, hand sort their waste and make the event more sustainable. So originally starting off with kind of 80,000 people festivals and stuff, and it was all volunteer work. You would be paid sometimes if the event got a grant or something like this, but leaving university in my final year, I was doing it part-time, and we started to realize that Wellington Waste Managers, as it was, just wasn't providing the impact we thought it could. We were helping maybe 10 events a year, and these events were organised by people who really cared. And we just knew that there was so many more people out there, so many more events, so many more businesses that could help in this. And we understood that in the economy, there needed to be money put towards this stuff. If it kept being seen as something that was volunteer and something that was a nice to have and extra, there wasn't real value in it in terms of the organizers' eyes. It wasn't a necessary service the way maybe a stage is. And so we set out to founded Nonstop Solutions, which myself and my co-founder founded in 2022. And so 2021, 2022, we're turning 2 in like a couple of days. And we really went in with this idea that we needed to help as many events and businesses as we could, while also getting this idea that it is a necessary service for people to consider waste. It's not an afterthought or a secondary expense to kind of tag on the side if you have some extra money, which we've really seen that change the way people think about waste and think about sustainability as like a necessary from the start. So yeah, I definitely found that sustainability has been kind of underpinning everything I do, but it wasn't necessarily something I studied or something that I thought I would go into a sustainably focused career, let alone start a business that's helping others be sustainable. So it kind of just fell into place a little bit, and it's been incredibly rewarding, and I've been so privileged to be able to be where I am and be surrounded by the team I do have. So yeah, it's been really cool. My job really is I think Julia mentioned like running the business. And while everything we do is like how people often talk about the bottom line, our bottom line isn't money, our bottom line is sustainability and people. And so while everything is driven by that, a lot of our impact and stuff is just about getting the business going to operate within this kind of new world. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Just casually running a business, so that's all there is to it. Happy second birthday. That's absolutely amazing what you're doing, and I'm sure has amazing impact. So thank you for sharing. And last but certainly not least, we've got Jess. So Jess has some previous experience working at Charles Sturt University and Greening Australia. It was very recently, like this week recently, started a new role at ANU. So tell us about your journey.
Hi guys, thank you again so much for joining us today. So I'll just share my screen. All right. Okay, so my journey is a little bit different. So I just first would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land which I speak on today is the Ngunnawal people. Okay, so a little bit about me. I actually haven't graduated yet. I'm in my last semester of a Bachelor of Environmental Science, specialising in ecology and conservation at Charles Sturt University. And while I was studying, I've always wanted to work in an environmental team within a university because, as we mentioned, they do have a very unique societal stance that can actually make a lot of influence within sustainability. Or to work in a wildlife rehabilitation center, and I love spiders, bats, native flowers. So my career journey, it actually started going into this bachelor, and I went into an entry-level role within Greening Australia as a field officer. I also did a waste consultant internship with sustainability at Charles Sturt as a part of my work placement that led to a casual role as a sustainability student advisor. And then I also progressed in Greening Australia into an environmental educator. And then I took a completely left field in my career, and I actually became a school education officer, which was actually completely removed from sustainability. But I'll speak on that in a little bit. And then I just was very fortunate to get a role with Australian National University as an environmental management officer, outreach and engagement. So Greening Australia, as I mentioned, I was a field officer. I was out. I was doing all the technical side to environmental science, and then that progressed into a role where I went around Sydney schools, and then I actually educated primary and high school about environmental science. And then we did tree workshops as well, which was a lot of fun. And then while I was doing that, it was coinciding with positions at sustainability at Charles Sturt, and it was absolutely fantastic, where I actually was grateful enough to attend an ACTS conference in 2021. I also joined SUN, which was fantastic to see how different students in different universities were taking on the sustainability space and how they were going. And then now I'm in my current role, which was Charles Sturt University as a school education officer. So this was completely, like I said, removed from my role. It was actually going around the Raveena region, teaching low socioeconomic communities and schools about tertiary education and also career options. And I actually learned that even though this was removed from my role, it actually taught me a lot. And I had a lot of experience and skills that I was able to transfer from that current role into this new role at ANU. So it taught me great communication skills, how to adapt my communication style in order to get certain information across to others. It helped me with my presentation skills, and it taught me to travel, how to do event management. So it was actually a fantastic opportunity that, even though it wasn't necessarily in the sustainability space, I did learn a lot of valuable skills in that role that I can now transfer into my new role. So within this, I actually have learnt a lot throughout my whole career. And that's when interviewing, I ensure that I actually bring out a bit of my personality in it. I'm a little bit of a jokester. I like to have a laugh. So I ensure to bring that to my work as well. And you don't also have to meet each selection criteria within a job application if you believe that's something that you can learn, but you actually meet a lot of the other criteria. Go for it. Believe in yourself, because I didn't necessarily meet all the criteria for my new role, but I was fortunate enough to get it because I did prove that I have had experience, and also I'm willing to learn all the experience that I may fall short with. Skills, like I mentioned, are transferable. You may not necessarily work within the field, and also take opportunities to volunteer and network. So I network with ACTS, with Sun, with also CSIRO. It was great to connect with all those people and professionals and learn off them. And also choose jobs that you enjoy. You're there for 5 days a week. This current role that I'm doing is a role that incorporates social and educational aspects of environmental science. And it also was very lucky to incorporate actual field work in ecology, wildlife ecology, and vegetation ecology as well. So that's why I chose the job. And yeah, so that would be what I learned in my career. And thank you very much.
Amazing. Some really great lessons there, and a few I'm going to pick up on too. So that's we've heard from everyone now. Some really interesting stories there, and I'm very intrigued to see how you will progress in your careers and continue onwards. One thing I picked up on is the importance, I think, of, well, at least to everybody on the panel, how important has volunteering and or doing intern work been to secure your current position? I see lots of nods there. Does anybody think they wouldn't be where they were if they hadn't put that time and effort into volunteering?
Yeah, I know that's true for me. Obviously everyone's nodding, but I think as well, it's like, I think people don't realize, I don't know, I feel like it's very much a domino effect. You do one thing, maybe it doesn't seem like it's a very big thing, but then actually you're applying for maybe a volunteer or something, which is like free, but you still need to apply. And then you're like, oh yeah, I did this. And then that gets you into the next thing. And then there you meet somebody who then you follow up with, and then they give you an actual job and you're like, wow. So I definitely think it's like, I think my advice in general is always just apply to lots of things, attend lots of events. And I know in fashion, the sustainability space is quite small still. Like it's there, but you know, a lot of it is just kind of knowing who's who and understanding what jobs are actually out there and what kind of opportunities there are.
I think also, so a lot of people think that sustainability, if to work in sustainability, you have to work in like a sustainability organization. And that's very much not true. Like there is sustainability jobs in every single organization. It's such a pressing career at the moment, and we need everyone being able to embed their knowledge and their sustainable practices into organizations that might not be doing the right thing, but maybe you can be there and teach them what the right thing is to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I was able to kind of bring that in to roles that had nothing to do with sustainability and work. But I also think the underpinning gold in volunteering and networking is the people, and it's finding not necessarily a volunteering role that you love, but it's finding volunteering with the right people, because those people are then going to help you connect to jobs and other opportunities. So yeah, even if it's not I went to my first volunteering thing. My friend knocked on my door, went, "You're coming with me. We're getting on the bus. We're going to this meeting." I just found out about it. I had no idea what I was doing. Walked in and loved the people. I did not want to sort waste at an event. That was not what I wanted to be spending my time doing. It was not at all on my radar. but I just loved the people, and I realized I wanted to be around people like this who really got me and who got thing. And then I fell in love with the work. And so it was, and then those people helped me get this or help me build this. So it's so much more about that people connection behind the volunteering and networking.
And I think that's also environmental science and sustainability is in largely incorporating people, because at the end of the day, our impact is what is affecting our global state. So not only is it like a huge part of being in the industry, but then you also make long life friends, like through volunteering, through all the careers. I've met incredible people that I'm still friends with today. So
I'm going to be the really boring person to talk about your resume. So I would say too, like, it does show passion for what you're doing to an organization. So like your connections might get you in the door and it's great, but we've literally had people hand in their resumes and they don't have anything sustainability related on them. They might have been the perfect candidate, but we've selected people just because they might know the same person, get an interview, but they've got this long list of volunteering or other things they've done. And you can tell this person's passionate. They've taken time out of their day to go contribute to whatever the sustainability field is they're interested in. And it does speak wonders. Like it does, I know it takes time and no one wants to do something for free, but what everyone's said here is you end up loving it. And it doesn't feel like it's a cost, it's an investment. You really enjoy the time, the people, learning new skills, and maybe crossing out things you don't like as well and figuring out what you do along the way.
I do think it, can I jump in? I was just going to say, I do think it is worth acknowledging that, like, I think it does come with a lot of privilege to be able to volunteer and to take time out, which often it is. Like, I know friends who haven't been able to participate in things because they've had they had more like work stress or, you know, income, financial stress and all of these things. So I do think it's also like worth raising that, like, I think as this conversation evolves, it is really important to ask how privilege is playing into these types of roles and the types of sustainability that we can all participate in. But yeah, that was just a little 2 cents as well.
Look, you're perfectly right. And I know, you know, coming from the university space, we're always trying to balance that opportunity between giving students volunteering experience and having that those opportunities with, you know, budgets and things like that. But I can pretty much guarantee you, if you are at a university in Australia and New Zealand and you are interested in getting some volunteering experience, whether it's just on an ad hoc, like 1 day opportunity, maybe you could help out with a particular event or something like that. It doesn't need to be something that's necessarily drawn out, an internship or green impact, for example, that takes place over a couple of months. So if you are looking to get some of that experience, reach out to your sustainability teams at your various universities. They will no doubt have something that should be able to work in with your current work-life balance. And it's an excellent segue to a question we've had come through on the chat from Izzy, who said, "You're all an incredible bunch, very impressed. I'd love to hear about tips with dealing with burnout and the transition from student life to work life." So I don't think burnout is something that's unique to any particular industry, but as a few of you have picked up on, there's a lot of work to be done by those that are in the sustainability field. And I think a lot of pressure is put on even early career professionals in this space. We're expected to cover a lot of different areas around sustainability. Burnout is real. I can attest to that. Is this something that you guys have experienced or have any tips and advice on?
yeah, so I feel like burnout also is like on top of the like green kind of stress that we also get with our industry. Like sometimes working in the industry can be very disheartening because you do have to face a lot of potential stats or potential experiences, which is disappointing. But again, it's those connections, sharing that experience with others, hearing other people's similar experiences, being able to vent to those as well. And yeah, with burnout, it's just ensuring that you're also always keeping that heart within your passion as well. Like we're all passionate about sustainability, so ensuring that we do foster that kind of heart, and then always ensuring that you can remove yourself from it as well. And that's why I did go to a different career. I could practice some sustainability, but then also it ensured that I wasn't studying it, working within it. Sometimes that can become overwhelming. So yeah, just keeping that in mind that you can practice sustainability maybe to a lesser degree in a different career if you do need to do that.
Anyone else want to jump on?
I think also it's important to remember that we're all kind of in this together. So every little thing that you might do actually makes a huge difference. So if everyone did one thing that was like maybe put coffee cups in the right bin, it makes a huge difference in the long run. So when you're talking about burnout, yeah, I guess you have to kind of remember that you're doing the best that you can. You're making a huge difference just by being passionate in sustainability. And I think bouncing off what Jess said, making sure that you have that support network around you where you can be like, okay, great, you're working on one thing, I'm working on one thing. Let's just focus on this at a time. Let's take a moment to breathe as well, doing things like mindfulness or yoga. As Julia was saying, it's all about making sure you've got that social well-being as well as sustainability. Sustainability is all about it being holistic. So I guess you want to try and make sure that you're remembering that what you're doing is really great and that everything that you are doing is really great. You're not going to solve the world's problems all in one day or all in one lifetime, but you're there contributing, making a difference, being the next change maker, and you're with other people that are going to do that. So, or influencing someone else, even if you can influence one person to put a coffee cup in the landfill bin rather than recycling, you're doing an amazing job.
I think
I keep cutting you off, Julia.
we're just insane. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think like, yeah, that whole balance is so important, but I also think it's important to not feel like, I think, you can be in sustainability in different spaces. It might be that you're somebody who's in a position of life where you do need a lot more like financial stability. And maybe that you do go for a role where your impact maybe is more focused in one particular way. And maybe you do compromise a little bit on accepting that there are some things which you can't change in your particular role. Whereas I think that you might then at other times be in a position where actually like, no, I really want to like fully live. I don't want to have to compromise on my values at all in this job. And I'm willing to take a pay cut right now. And like, I think it's okay to go through all those different stages. And I know for me, I've been like, small businesses are great. And then I'm like, small businesses don't make much impact. And then I'm like, big corporate companies can make so much change. And then I go there and I'm like, maybe they can't. And now I'm like, actually research into small businesses could be great. And it's fine. You can kind of go around the hamster wheel of sustainability a few times. And it's all just kind of like figuring out what works for you right now, and how you can, what's sustainable for you in your current circumstance. I think that's kind of where I'm at least.
I just
Yeah, I
want
might.
to add this. I'm not
Go,
gonna...
Rhiannon. I don't want to cut you off.
All right, I'm going to give my 2 cents on this as somebody that really does deal with burnout and has been in the game for a while now. It is okay to say no. The world's problems will be there tomorrow when you log in at an appropriate work hour. So it is okay to set your own boundaries within work and say no, because if you don't, I guarantee you'll be hitting that burnout way earlier than you need to. So that's my number one for that. But Chris, you going?
No, that was pretty much what I was going to allude to, but you said it much more artfully than I did and concisely. I was going to say it's basically boundaries, but also you should feel comfortable talking to people about burnout, in whether it's uni and that transition to work. I think the biggest mistake I made going into my early career was thinking I had to run at 120%, and I hit burnout within the first 6 months very quickly because I didn't set boundaries. And in any organization, if you don't put your hand up to say I'm struggling, they will not know. They can't know. So you've got to be just as communicative and also expect that your colleagues will support you. If you do find yourself in a workplace where that's, they're expecting more than you, then that's a really, I guess you kind of probably question whether that's the right place for you at that point in time, because if they're pushing you to inhuman limits, then that's unfair on you. And I mean, everyone, maybe as people have said, it's your passion, you're really driven towards it, but yeah, never be afraid to have a conversation would be the long and short, and just see if you can wiggle that into a more manageable thing, because at the end of the day, you are human, you have limits, and pushing yourself beyond those limits, you're going to get less effective with time just because you're going to hit a wall more consistently.
And Sophie, how does that go when you're running your own business?
I'm not going to pretend to have it figured out at all. It's still something I'm figuring out. I think, like everyone's touched on pretty incredible points, I think diversifying and just giving yourself grace. I realized I was so stressed about being this perfect role model to everyone. Oops, lights gone off. Everyone I employed, and having to be the sustainable role model in my own life, and I couldn't make a mistake. But then also trying to run this company and it being so different to kind of all the other companies I saw, and I wasn't following a path of anyone. It was all very new and innovative, and that's stressful in itself. And so I realized that I had to give myself grace in one area or another, and I had to diversify what I was doing. So being able to really focus in on this company and Nonstop Solutions being sustainable, and letting myself make a mistake in my personal life, and not having to be like the example role model, because I realized quickly that my team didn't need that either. They needed me to be real with them and say that I'd bought a wrap muesli bar, or I'd like not use my reusable cup or whatever it was, but it was like, it suddenly meant we weren't all performing to such high standards, because I wasn't expecting myself to be at such a high standard. Yeah.
Excellent. Be kind to yourself, definitely. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming through the Q&A. We'll try and get through them before we run out of time. One says, I previously worked in the automotive industry as a project manager and going to change my career to a sustainability area. My question is how to convince the employer that I'm able to cope with this new industry. So is there any experience in this, in sort of convincing those that you work with that you can move into a different area? Anyone from the panel?
I'm happy to kind of, Jess, do you want to go? Because I feel like I've talked just recently.
I've also talked just recently as well. I would say that having just like even a minor business plan just to back up with some facts to explain why sustainability is important in the automotive field, and also have that backed up with how that could necessarily maybe save money to the company if you do decide to go down that route, and how we do all need to collectively work together regardless what industry you're in to actually make a difference within sustainability, is probably just like kind of like a brief foundation of where you could get started on that.
I'm gonna think about what advice I got actually from uni. I can't remember if it was Stop On, or it might have even been Rav's team. They ran a careers workshop, and I thought this was one of the most useful skills, because transitioning from water to climate change isn't actually as straightforward as it sounds. And one of the great things was to look at the skills that this industry was looking for, and then break down your own skills. Because if you keep breaking down your own skills, you can actually find you've got a lot of them, because you've got probably many transferable skills being a manager. I'm sure you've got great stakeholder engagement, great people management, great ability to keep budgets on track, things like that. Everyone who works in sustainability still needs those skills. And then if you can back that up with anything that you're learning at university, anything you've got to volunteer, or any small experience, I think that'd be the way to go, because it shows that you have all the necessary skills that they need, plus you're building upon your knowledge. And just be also open with them that you're willing to learn new things on the job and on the fly, because I would say, as much as no one really wants to hear it, 95% of what I learned in my job was on the job, and 5% was uni. And yeah, so I would just look at those two skill sets and see if you can transition yours over to theirs, and show how you could meet those gaps with your knowledge anyway.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got time for one more question, so I'm just going to put this through. We've got somebody that's currently applying for internships and has already heard some great hints for starting a career in sustainability. Do you have any other tips for how to get your foot in the door from what we've already discussed?
I'll jump in here. I think potentially it applies, I don't know, can't speak to other industries, but within anything remotely independent or that kind of, you have to be comfortable with being rejected and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like the more you ask, and whether you receive a yes or a no, like being comfortable with that no and that thing, because you've learned something from that, you've gained something from that experience, and you have to ask a million people or heaps of people for help, and then you'll figure out the right path for you. And I think alongside that, people do want to help. Like people, especially in sustainability, they want more people in sustainability. Like we want more people fighting this fight. So you'll be amazed by how much people are willing to give, even if it's just advice or a connection to someone else. It might not be the direct path to the person in the job, to you getting the job, but it may be kind of wiggly woggly all over the place. But it is just fostering those connections and being comfortable if someone says, hey, I can't help you right now, but talk to this person, and being comfortable with that, able to be passed on, and, you know, just figure out where it goes, because it's not always going to be a simple, straightforward line to, I want to work for this sustainable company and now I'm going to. So yeah.
I would follow on from that as well. One of my friends just posted an achievement that she did on LinkedIn. And from that, she got so many people asking to get coffee with her, and just different kind of organizations just wanting to connect with her. So she went on all these different meetups over coffee, and they were from completely, so she works in Red Cross, and then she had some meetups with some consultancy organizations right through to other universities, so different types of organizations. And from that, she actually got 3 job offers. So I think it's also about you know, the connections that you make and the people that you know, and not being afraid to put yourself out there on LinkedIn and really posting, being loud, being proud of the fact that you're doing all this amazing work, even if it's volunteering, internships, they're all amazing things to be doing. And then if an organization reaches out to you to grab coffee, have that conversation. You really never know where that conversation could take you. I agree with the rejection point that if it doesn't take you anywhere, that's okay. There will be another avenue. And it's really hard when you're in that mindset to be like, I don't know where to go now. They've said no, but I do promise you there will be another opportunity coming. But just on internships as well, if you're struggling to find an internship, the one thing I did was I just emailed so many different places and sent in my CV. And I really tried to target my cover letter or my CV to their kind of organization's values. And so if you can have a look at that and just email them, they might not be looking for an internship for an intern, but just email them, and you never know what could happen, because that's what happened with me. I actually got my internship through me just sending my CV. They weren't even looking for an intern, but I was really lucky because I just wanted to get experience with a council, and with this particular council in climate change. So you just really never know. So don't be afraid to try.
Yeah, and I think I'd also just kind of add to that, obviously, like your LinkedIn network is only as big as your LinkedIn network. So I think there's also the side of like, if you're looking to grow that, I know things that were really helpful for me was just like attending events where the people who you want to be are at. So things like book launches, for example, listening to podcasts, so you, particularly like smaller niche ones around people in your industry, so you know who's who, and just be like, oh, okay, yeah, that report came out, people are talking about that. Oh, what is that about? Who wrote that? What company did it come from? And just kind of starting to understand like what kind of who's who and what's going on. I think I found that really helpful, because it also helps you sift through when you hear about roles, like, is that a company that's, what reason do they have for doing it? Are they approaching it from like a really business entrepreneurial mindset? Are they approaching it from like an NGO mindset? Because all of these things might be different ways that you can participate in sustainability, and, you know, where your strengths might be valued more or less. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we are just about out of time. It's absolutely flown through the hour, so I can't believe we've gotten through it so quickly. I didn't even get through my list of questions that I had for everyone. So thank you, everyone. I will just wrap up with that. I cannot back up the LinkedIn, the power of LinkedIn enough. If you're not on LinkedIn, you need to get there, start making some connections, start interacting with people. I get opportunities. I learn so many things from what people share, free events that you can get access to. So definitely jump on that one if you're not already there. But otherwise, we will wrap up. I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and sharing your journey. It's been really interesting and inspiring. And yeah, it would be great. Maybe we could do a follow-up and see. One of my questions was, where do we see everyone in 10 years? So maybe we can follow up in a few years and see how you're all progressing. But thank you so much. And we'll see you at the next event. Bye, everyone.